you really
when it's
can.
Oh,
just
wow.
really good. People are like, shut up.
Yeah. I visited San Diego at this point, it's probably a year ago, and I had a little bit of an existential crisis. I was like, people can live here? Like that's not fair. It's vacation destination.
We
It's too
do.
nice.
It's great. But
Yeah.
that reminds me, Brian, how's the baby?
Baby's good.
Good.
Still alive. So I've accomplished my goal of
Oh my God. Don't
keeping the baby alive.
don't even
Um,
joke about things like that. That's
no, she's great. Mom's great. Everything is really
good.
smooth sailing right now. So it's good. Um, all right. So what do you think? We have, let's see, 16 people in right now. I think maybe we can start getting the ball rolling on like an intro, and time is valuable. So people will trickle in, but we're
Sure.
recording this, so it should be good. So I'll just do a really quick intro. For those who don't know me on here, my name is Brian Scher. Started HeyCounsel a while back to kind of create this community and shared resources and shared learning experience and marketplace. It's a whole bunch of different things for independent, small firm, fractional practitioners. One of the things that we do are these tech demos. I find them very useful, both for my practice, but I think for everybody else to learn a little bit about what technology is out there and being developed, especially as AI has sort of taken over the headlines and is making really big strides in terms of lawyer productivity. So Paxton's great. I've used it myself. I wanted to get the true real live demo. So here we are with the Paxton team, and I will pass it over. I think Eddie's going to take the lead in kind of driving this, and we'll go from there. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Eddie.
Thank you, Brian. Excited to be here and to have the opportunity here to sort of show you all the product. So today, I think what we will do, how we'll start, just do a brief intro with some slides. I just kind of want to give you an overview. Like Brian said, there are a lot of tools on the market, and I'm sure many of you are trying different things. So I just kind of want to give you a little overview of what we're doing, why we're a little different. So we're Paxton, Paxton Legal AI. We build our own custom legal specific LLMs, and I'll get to that in a second. On this call from our team are myself. I'm Eddie Nasser. I'm the product lead, the legal product lead here. I'm an attorney. I had my own small practice prior to joining Paxton as the product lead, and I began my career at Paul Weiss in the litigation department in New York. So, major international firm. And joining me on the call is my colleague, Michael Woodson. He's our operations lead. Michael kind of handles, he is, either of us can be the point of contact for folks on this call who want to, have any issues with billing or, feedback on the product, anything like that. You'll see our contact over here. And so just, from the bird's eye view, a majority of attorneys now are looking for generative AI solutions, right? So most attorneys have a plan to adopt some solutions within 1 year. But most attorneys are looking to generalize AI solutions to solve industry-specific problems. So we've all heard the stories about the lawyers getting, sanctioned for using ChatGPT. We all know that ChatGPT, or we all should know, ChatGPT hallucinates cases. So it is not grounded in fact, and that's a really big distinction between Paxton and more generalized models like ChatGPT and Gemini or Bard. But another big distinction between us and all of the other AI providers, and that will include Casetext, Lexis, everyone else that's doing an AI solution, is that all of them are built the same way. All of these vendors are using OpenAI to power their system, right? So they're all going to be largely the same. And we don't think you can call yourself an AI company unless you actually have AI capabilities. And that's what we've done. We've built our own industry-specific legal large language model. And that yields a few major advantages. So first is cost efficiency, right? Running these huge models like GPT-4 is very expensive. It requires the most sophisticated GPUs, and it costs a lot of money to scale up and to rely on those. Uh, our custom model is built on top of open source models. So we've taken open source models that are close to GPT-4 for generalized purposes, and we've fine-tuned them to become better than any closed source model on the specific tasks that lawyers actually use, right? So our LLMs are better than the generalized ones for legal specific tasks. Now, why should you trust us? Well, our company is built by open source AI experts. Our CEO is his name's Tanguy Chow. He had was educated from MIT, PhD from MIT, and then began his career at McKinsey and worked as a VC where he invested in two of the most prominent legal tech companies, Casetext and Ironclad. And our CTO, the one who's really driving the building of our open source model, Mike Yulin, built a custom model at his previous job. Before large language models were a thing, before this big hype about AI, Mike was already working in the industry in machine learning. So we're really sort of founded by experts. And I think you'll see that kind of in our product. So on top of our LLM, we have built a few applications, and this is what I'll really get to in the demo. So we have a legal research tab, a drafting tool, and a document analysis tool. And I'm just sort of previewing that, but I'll show you all of that in more detail. And you'll see here the kinds of tasks that are performed by Paxton users, like compare documents, draft a memo. We have a Boolean query tool. So if you're doing some really targeted research and you want to, just go over to Lexis or Westlaw or whatever, and you have this need for a specific Boolean tool, you can write in natural language and get a Boolean output. We also have case law and rules, statutes, and regulations from all 50 states and the federal jurisdiction, right? So we have pretty comprehensive, and we've collected all of that, and we have all of that in-house. Paxton is being used by over 2,000 attorneys across 200 organizations for daily work, and I'll show you some of the ways that the users are taking advantage of Paxton to really save time and make themselves more efficient. Our approach has garnered us some attention. So we've gotten some awards, including a finalist for Best New Law Company and Best Use of AI in Litigation. And we just last week won a bronze medal at Startup Alley at the Tech Show in Chicago. But it's not just the big players that are giving us some attention. We have some really enthusiastic users, right? So Paxton inspired me and equipped me to be a better lawyer. That's pretty high praise. I'm profoundly satisfied with Paxton's current capabilities and eagerly anticipate its evolution. And I think this highlights something that you will see if you're using Paxton, which is that we are constantly pushing updates. Our real strength is that we're a very technical team. So we're iterating. The product that you have right now, it's not beta, but it is, it's constantly getting better, right? And you can really notice the feel of the product, the outputs, the functionality is going to improve if you're using the product, right? And this is what everyone wants. It definitely saves me time. So that's sort of an intro to Paxton, and let me dig in a little bit here into the actual product. So here you will see, you can just go over to, this is available on the web, and let me just show you where you get that. So you can just go over to paxton.ai and launch Paxton, right? And you can just try it for free. So if you try this, I'm signed in, so it goes here, but you could actually just try Paxton for free by just launching. You can sign in as a guest, or you can sign in and you'll be able to save your search history and so on. So back to what I have saved. So you'll see the sort of different modules, and again, this is built on top of our custom LLM. So in the let me start with case law because I think that's more interesting. The jurisdictions you could filter by state courts and federal courts, so we have pretty much everything covered here. So here I have a few examples, right? So this is somebody asked me this example at the Tech Show. I want to understand the law for searching a home in Tennessee. A confidential informant told the police that 3 months ago there was a cocaine transaction in the home. Law enforcement knows that the house has a reputation as a source of drug sales. Is that sufficient to get a warrant to search the home? Right. So you'll see this is natural language, and you can input. This is more like an issue spotter. This is more like you're talking to an associate and actually asking them. All right, 1 second, just receiving a call. This is more like how you'd speak to an actual attorney as opposed to, searching, cocaine and confidential informant, right? Like how you have to do in Lexis or Westlaw. And the output is pretty good. You'll see it's the language that it uses is more similar again to an attorney. It gives you kind of the standard. It's contingent upon establishing probable cause, which is of course correct. And then it cites its sources, right? So we're not like ChatGPT. We're not making things up. We're telling you where we get these sources from. This is from the Tennessee Supreme Court. We've highlighted the specific language that supports the statement. So this is obviously very important. You can verify everything that Paxton says by looking at the citations, right? So, you can double check. You can go pull this case elsewhere. You can actually read through the case right here in the source viewer. Now, there are a bunch of.
I have a quick question on that. For the case, like in Westlaw, it has, shepherdization. I don't know what Lexis calls it. Does this have it? So it's like, okay, it's citing a case, but maybe the case was overturned.
So, yeah, we don't have right now. We don't have like a little indicator of whether it's good law or bad law. We've built out shepherdization functionality, and we're improving it. So it should be citing good law. But we do definitely encourage folks to double check, the same way that you might double check the work of a paralegal. You do want to make sure that the cases you're citing are good law. So we don't have an indicator of whether it's good law, but Paxton should know whether it's good law and shouldn't be citing cases that are overturned. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I was just curious if it had like a little indicator of, distinguished by like that whole type of thing, or if
not yet. But that's something that we've gotten a lot of feedback on, of course, and we are building. I can tell you right now, we have I think 2 engineers full time on this project, and so we are going to be rolling that out, the shepherdization function. And I can't call it shepherdization because
exactly, yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But so sort of a indicator of the status of the law. Yeah, that's like in the pipeline right now. So that's the kind of thing that you will notice an improvement on, if you're using Paxton.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And so just as an example, again, so this is, in the criminal context, you can ask for different areas of law. So here I asked, and this is more, again, natural language in the way that you might talk to an associate. A former employee of my company, Startup Tech Co., left the company and began working at our main competitor, Big Bad Tech Co. Silence my phone. And had intimate knowledge of our product, code base, and customer list, right? So we want to prevent him from using this information to our detriment. So, I said vaguely, we had an employment agreement that includes non-compete, non-solicitation, IP ownership, right? So I know that that's not super descriptive, but it does give sort of a basis. What can we do, right? So open-ended question, what do you suggest? And Paxton, you will see, understands that question and gives you a pretty solid response. It's important to consider the enforceability of the non-compete, non-solicitation, and IP ownership clauses, right? So that's obviously really important. It starts here, generally scrutinized by reasonableness in terms of time, geography, and scope. And it cites federal law, right? So it's citing a Ninth Circuit case here. But Paxton knows, so I gave it federal courts in the Ninth Circuit and state courts of California. Paxton is smart. Paxton knows it's crucial to note that some states like California have a strong public policy against non-compete agreements, which of course, if anyone's practicing in sort of tech employment, that California is really strict about non-compete clauses. And so again, it's citing to California law for this. It's telling you that the non-compete clause may not be enforceable in California. which is smart, right? It's sort of particularly pulling that out from the state law. And then it proceeds to non-solicitation, gives you analysis there, and the IP ownership. And then it says, given these considerations, it's advisable to view the specific terms of your employment agreement and assess the reasonableness and scope. So that's a particular instruction, right? So of course you need to have the language and you could input that. So had I had an employment agreement, I could kind of put that in here and get Paxton's opinion, and it would cite to case law about the reasonableness and scope, comparing that to precedent. It will also, you'll see, it suggests follow-up questions. So here, what specific steps can we take to assess the enforceability of these clauses? All right, so I clicked on that, and it generates this output. And so it's giving you a very specific, and again, citing its sources, why it's making these suggestions, right? Citing different cases about how you would assess the enforceability of these clauses. So, works in different areas of law. And here, I'll just show you another one. I asked about an emergency relocation motion, which is more related to family court, and again, sort of, I won't read the whole thing again, but natural language type prompt. And, I asked, what's the standard to file an emergency relocation motion, right? So, and again, it knows which jurisdiction I'm in. I asked about Texas and I selected Texas. And so it's giving me a Texas specific response. So that's the case law function. And again, we're constantly improving. We scrape the sort of open, we source rather case law daily. So similar to Google scraping the internet for its rankings daily, we do the same for our case law and for our laws, rules, and regulations. Here, I just want to show you. So we asked, I selected the source, the Code of Federal Regulations, and I asked, my client wants to raise money for a private investment fund that will invest in real estate. What are the rules, laws, and regulations relevant to raising money for a private investment fund? And so it's going to, cite particular laws that are relevant here. And, it's telling you where it comes from. These are SEC rules. And, it's giving you sort of an overview, right? And had I had more follow-up, I can give, what are specific disclosure requirements necessary, or what criteria must a fund meet to qualify as a venture capital fund? So sort of different follow-ups based on the language that I gave it and the response. So Paxton has sort of associative knowledge there.
Eddie, I just ask a quick question here. How does it present the actual statutes? Like if you clicked in, how would it show and link to those statutes?
Similar source viewer, right? So it's this particular query I kind of cut off before it was finished, and so the source viewer is not highlighting, but it's actually giving you the language. This is the actual full, regulation cited at the top, and it's giving you the full language here. That answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so everything that we cite is going to have the source viewer pulled up here on the right, and it's going to tell you where it came from. You can also search the web. You could search news or just search the web generally, right? So I asked it, what did Sam Bankman-Fried do to spur the criminal charges against him? And it gives me a response. He's convicted of fraud, and it's kind of updated. It's updated, you'll see, out until 2024, right? So it has recent data. This is useful just for quick sort of background for news or web searches and natural language interface. And then we can get to the drafting. The drafting, I think, is really fun and really dynamic, and you can be really creative here. So I tried to show a few different uses. So here, again, natural language. Company A wants to engage individual B as an independent contractor. Company A wants to make clear that this is not an employment relationship. Terms are $50 per hour, up to 10 hours per week. Company A is engaging individual B to perform maintenance and handyman services, right? So that's the prompt that I put in here, that I typed into the prompt box. But you also can add additional sort of context here that will color Paxton's responses, right? So what's the type of document? Contract. I could have been more specific, but I want it to be vague here just to show you the Paxton kind of can understand the natural language and will understand context even if you're vague. Right? Name of the parties, and then you can input some specific terms. And you'll see, I wasn't super organized about how I input these specific terms, but I just put semicolons between them, and Paxton can understand that. And so here, company A will reimburse for expenses, blah, blah, jurisdiction, and then some specific, some instructions about style or, you could put in a lot of things here. Formatting could be bullet points, could be really formal, whatever. And you'll see it kind of gave me an outline. All right, so here's an outline. Preamble, recitals, pretty solid start. And so this really, in my opinion, one of the biggest sort of pain points as an attorney is the blank page problem, right? So you might be doing something, you might not have a precedent, or you might not know exactly where it is. Paxton just solves the blank page problem. So here you have an outline. Now, it might not be perfect, and of course, it probably isn't. You probably have some edits, and you should, right? And you could ask Paxton to make those edits. So, okay, I like the outline. I said draft a contract according to the outline, and you'll see that it actually fills in the language, right? The agreement, in sort of legal terms, with the recitals here at the beginning, and then the provisions about the particular agreement that they're working on. And so it's pretty robust, right? It's a really, really strong starting point, especially as compared to a blank page. And this just took a few seconds to generate. And then, in your response, you can really, this is where you can be dynamic and creative, right? What other provisions would you suggest? So that's a vague question, just general question. What would you suggest? And then I asked specifically, can you suggest language to make the services provided more clear? And note that I didn't have to say, provision 2 here, right? I just said services provided. And Paxton's able to pick up on that, right? And I said include specific examples, make sure that's not an exhaustive list. So here it gives me, here responding to my first part of my question, here's some more provisions you might want to include, non-solicitation, non-compete, dispute resolution, so on. Insurance, which is one that I didn't include in the initial, but is of course important if you're working with a contractor. And then it picks up on the services provided, right? So it suggests specific examples of the handyman type services. So it knows that I was talking about provision 2, even though I didn't tell it, and it will add that in. And then I said, okay, update the contract, with the additional provisions and with the services provided amendment. And here it is. All right, so you'll see this is a new contract with the full language, including the examples and including these additional provisions, dispute resolution, insurance, IP, non-compete, and so on. So it's really dynamic here, right? And I could, prompt it what are key provisions that should be included. I could ask for additional edits to eliminate, to change the style. And you could really work with this in a back and forth manner. And so it's a little bit different style of work, but once you get used to that, you're really ideating with Paxton. It's really sort of an idea partner, not just a drafter, not just a research tool, but somebody that you could talk to and somebody that you can use to improve the language that you already have, or to solve the blank page problem. It really is a powerful tool. And here's another example. So that was just a.
Sorry, I have a quick question. So, you showed your bases for all the laws and all that stuff. Like, what are your bases for these contracts? Where are you getting
Great question.
precedent, so to say, for drafting this?
So yeah, great question. So we've pulled contract clauses from various examples that are, again, publicly available. So everything that's been filed with Edgar, SEC database, we have been trained on that. There are various contract databases that are available that are specific to different areas of law, and we've pulled on that. So this is all available in the web app. For some larger firms, we have firm-specific deployments that pulls language built on their data, their database.
That's what I was going to ask next. Like, can I put in contracts that we do and be like, hey?
Yeah, I will show you that feature next. And
okay.
I think there was a question in.
Yeah, Peter asked a question around sort of like, I guess it was multi-part, but really, and Peter, you can chime in if you want, but it's basically like there's a process that Peter goes through on some complex agreements where it starts with a term sheet and then kind of progresses from there. Peter, like, do you want to kind of articulate what your question is there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, different lawyers do it differently, but over the years, you come up with a process that you work with on the client in terms of refining and getting started on the agreement. If you don't already have a form agreement, then that's one thing. But it isn't, it is quite detailed in the beginning, and it's not in legal language per se. But I'm just wondering how much you've worked with complex commercial contracts for this, because employment agreements, I wouldn't consider that to be complex. But then again, I'm just wondering how much you worked with the work process for lawyers on how they get started or how they do their jobs, I guess, in terms of coming up with the interface. And
we are constantly incorporating feedback from our users, and we have a pretty diverse set of users with different needs. So this is just sort of brainstorming from my head about kinds of use cases, right? So if you had particular sort of commercial contracts that you wanted to use, let me show you the next feature that I think will be useful. So you're not starting from the blank page. You might have files. So this particular example is not really going to speak to you, but the functionality will. So what you can do is, in the file analysis tool, you can upload, in the file manager, you can upload a set of documents. So here I uploaded briefing in the case before the Supreme Court right now about the challenging the constitutionality of the CFPB. And I asked some questions about review the enclosed documents, predict how the Supreme Court will hold based on the briefing. Now, what you can do here in the file manager is you can just create a folder about your particular. So let's say you're working with a client, you've done a lot of commercial agreements with that particular client, right? So you make a folder there. Then in the file analysis, you go to new chat, you select your source, you use your folder, and then you can prompt back and forth with with Paxton to interpret your precedents. So what you said, right? You start with a term sheet, you upload your term sheet, you can ask Paxton to build it out. If you have a term sheet in there and you have a precedent of a previous commercial agreement, you can upload both and say, okay, here's the term sheet, and this is the agreement that I want you to kind of copy the structure and so on. And Peter, for your use cases, we actually the more specific you are with your use cases, like I said, we're really, really good at incorporating feedback, right? So this is, Paxton's a young company and we're really lean and we have a ton of technical talent. So understanding specific use cases, and if you have this pain point, chances are other attorneys have this pain point. And so if, the more data we have about the particular workflows of, attorneys executing complex commercial agreements, the more robust we can make the tool in terms of the features, right? So please feel free to try us out. And we're happy to incorporate feedback if there's generalized need, which it sounds like there is, because the way that you're describing this is how I understand. Go ahead.
I mean, for a first-year associate, it's here's this agreement, compare the term sheet to the actual draft you received and see if they got everything in there, right? And then create a table and see if there's any differences, and from what was agreed, and there always are. And it takes hours of a 70, 100-page contract to make sure that everything was in there. And that's not even legal analysis, but having something that can go through and pick that out. And we also create a table of a key where this provision in the term sheet, it lives, even though it's in this order in the term sheet, it's in a different place in the agreement, because everyone, is taking something from the previous. So, I mean, I can see a huge amount of time saving and eliminate the need for a first-year associate. But if this is even able to do just these basic things.
For sure. And that's basically, we certainly don't want to be eliminating lawyers' jobs, but we definitely want to make them faster. And and you'll see here too, we have a document compare function, right? We're sort of still building this out. And again, I just have to say, we're really fast at building, but that doesn't mean that sometimes we've had a feature about putting up videos and getting those transcribed. And then, we kind of took it down because it wasn't getting used a lot. So our document compare feature is being built out, and that might be, compare term sheet to draft one, right? And you can kind of copy and paste that in there, or you could use the file analysis feature. So there are sort of different ways to skin a cat, if you will, in terms of the functionality of Paxton. But the workflows you're describing are the kinds of things that we're thinking about when we're building the product. And so, like I said, we love the feedback. we, so that's more or less the tool. I'm happy to sort of dig into anything else if anyone has like particular suggestions in terms of drafting or case law or anything like that. I'm also.
I have a couple of questions just to kick it off, and then I definitely want some people to raise their hands as they've already been doing. But I'll actually ask something that's in line with what Chris wrote in the chat. Well, first, his question is like, is there a limit on the amount of like files or size of files that you can upload within, within that file manager?
Yeah, so we haven't found, I think there is technically a limit, but we haven't found anyone to hit the limit. So try it and let us know if there's a point at which it's no longer functioning for the needs. I will say it sort of depends on what you're trying to do. The tighter the set of files, it's not the place to really be like a document manager, right? So it's not going to be your practice management system. Don't think of it like a Dropbox. The tighter your prompts, the tighter the set of documents, the more useful the responses will be. But in terms of file size, I don't think there's really, there's not like a practical limit. So yeah.
Is there a practical limit in terms of, I've noticed in using some of these tools that when I ask it to draft an agreement, even if I provide a template, it does a really good job on like not drafting something that's long. It's usually pretty concise. And oftentimes it does that, I mean, probably for reasons, guardrails that are created by the system or just like the way in which these things work, but that I'm not familiar with. But sometimes it's not great in the sense that like I'll feed it some documents that are designed to be much longer and it'll shorten them. And I'm like, well, this is great, but it's not, it's not super helpful because it's summarizing or cutting things out when I don't want it to, even if I ask it to, like give me the long version essentially. So I'm curious, are there like output limitations when we're drafting documents, like just using, this feature right here?
Yeah, so it's I would describe it as limitations, but I think these tools do tend toward the trend towards concision, like you're saying. But what you can do in that case, it's not a matter of the functionality not existing. It's a matter of kind of understanding how to speak Paxton, if you will, how to speak LLM. And so if you want a more robust provision, you could just ask it to include the to amend a particular provision, right? Like I did kind of here, right? Where amend provision 2, right? So, if you want more language, you want it to be more robust, you could also include instructions for style, like don't worry about brevity or, things like that. And you could consider the output to be any output that Paxton gives you is a draft, right? An editable draft. It's an editable response. So you can amend it however you want. There's some questions I'd like to address, like from James. No, we don't train off the data and files you upload. We don't look at those at all. IP issues. If you own a treatise, yes, you can upload your treatise. Feel free to try. I mean, like I said, there may be a size limit. I know we had an issue where we presented to a law school and then the tool kind of went viral and folks were uploading like their entire semester's casebooks onto the platform and trying to use Paxton to study for them basically. And so there was some limit that we had to impose because that's like not really that's not a real use case for our users. That's kind of an artificial use case. And it's bogging us down.
One of the things that I buy a copy of Adams on Drafting for all of our in-house partners, and because we've had a mandate from certain clients that we make everything plain language, plain English, and that's the Bible for us. So it's almost like talk to Mr. Adams and get him to license that so that you can incorporate it in your model, and you'd have a gold mine.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I will definitely take note of that because that's a really good idea. Like drafting style, we're constantly working on the style of the output, right?
Yeah.
And something that people have talked about, and that again we can do for our larger deployments is editing style, according to a particular preference, right? So if you have a
I think
firm of, go ahead.
one of the problems with the publicly available corpus of agreements is that they are profoundly crufty. And I say crufty from a software development sense because they have provisions that have just been copied and copied and copied, and they're vague, photocopies of each other. No one knows why they're in the agreement, but everyone just keeps bringing them forward. And he's shown that over and over and over again. And so garbage in, garbage out, right? If these clauses are there and they don't need to be, or nobody understands what they're for, you have a bad contract. So I mean that's an issue for AI in general, is that a lot of the content out there is garbage. But if you are able to take something like a treatise like this and use it to train, so that we can, because I've just spent my entire career converting poorly drafted documents from decades ago to plain English for particularly financial services companies, but we could do it so much faster. Passive voice, just have a passive voice detector.
Yeah. That's the sort of thing that you can do in the chat, right? So like you're saying, you're right. All LLMs have sort of a data sourcing problem, right? If they're trained from open data, that includes, some of the best work is going to be private, which again, in our private deployments for our biggest customers, we can kind of address that. Now on the web app version, that's a little bit more challenging, and that's where you need to start using the file analysis tool to input your own sort of work product that you want to emulate, or you can edit style, you can ask Paxton to eliminate passive voice, right? Things like that. It'll understand.
Yep. Do you have any publicly available or things that you can share where you did A/B testing against ChatGPT or some of the other models for certain tasks?
Yeah, I definitely have to get to the technical team on that. I know we do benchmarking, so I think we have definitely benchmarked against some of the bigger LLMs, but I don't have anything top of mind right now about that. And I think that we're going to be including some at some point. We'll be releasing I think you'll definitely sign up for it, and you'll start getting our emails, and you'll definitely get information about our benchmarks when that's available, because of course that's going to be relevant to our users.
And then one final question on security audits. Have you had any third-party audits done? In all of my engagements with any large company, they're like, we're okay with cloud service as long as they have been audited according to these certain standards.
Yeah, I think we are. Maybe Woodson, do you want to handle that in terms of security audits?
Yeah. So in terms of SOC 2 and ISO, I mean, we have the compliance protocols in place. We haven't had our audit yet. That's scheduled for this year, actually, though. So we're in progress.
Awesome.
Yeah, I could see that being a major blocker for
larger,
or firms with larger clients. Yeah.
The audits we get, we don't pass. It's not possible.
Yeah.
They're treating us like a software developer vendor, and we're like, which is a big problem for law firms. But
one of the questions in the chat from Sam actually highlights something that I think Peter was talking about as well, which is sort of like a desire to be able to train your own instance or create more of your own law firm instance of Paxton, because it's all great that we're feeding the same system that's learning and then passing our learnings off onto every other law firm that didn't do the work. But it would be nice if you could start to build your own proprietary instance of Paxton that has its competitive advantage, because like Peter's firm, they train every person on the Adams book, and that's their style of doing business, because it creates a little bit of a competitive advantage and better customer experience. And so I wonder, to what extent are you all thinking about enabling law firms to sort of build their own version of Paxton in a more customizable way? Because I could see that being a huge game changer for firms who want to adopt this tech.
For sure. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's sort of like a natural sort of like the mind goes there. It's it's not an engineering problem. It's sort of a business problem, if you will. It's really technically intensive to do that kind of thing, to be able to train an individual instance of Paxton. And so we do that for our larger deployments, and I believe we have like a 200 seat minimum for that. So it really is for like enterprise focused. And so if anyone's, you know, if that is in anyone's like practice right now, we'd love to sort of talk about that. But I do want to clarify, we don't train, we don't like what you're uploading and on based on the feedback, there's a way to give feedback, but we're not training our model based on the feedback. We are incorporating the feedback in a way that our engineers, you know, sort of a human is reviewing that and making changes to the model, right? But we're not doing any kind of reinforcement learning through human feedback based on your inputs, because, you know, some of that might be secure, right? So,
But to put it that's what real quick, to put it another way, Eddie. So like, if we have a certain style for doing something, we will need to basically redo that each time we're doing a contract, so to say. Like, it won't be able to store our prior approaches to this. We'll need to kind of start afresh each time we do this.
There's chat history, so you can kind of work with the chat history. A suggestion would be to maybe create in your workflows like a template, right, where you say like you know, a few lines that, you know, they call it like prompt engineering, right? And you can ask Paxton to make suggestions for you of this. But you can say like, I prefer not to use the passive voice. I like simple sentences, right? You know, whatever your preferences are. You kind of come up with that template and then you include that in your prompts. That's something that you can develop over time. You can improve, you can tailor your template, and then you can be including that in your prompts for the drafting tool or, you know, the file analysis tool. But it doesn't learn, so, you know, it won't, unless we're doing a firm deployment, it's not going to natively have your preferences. So you do have to do that kind of workaround with the templatization of your preferences.
So, for example, certain clients of ours, like American Express, does not publish their rules, whereas Visa and MasterCard, those rules are publicly available. Same with Discover. Discovers are like volumes. For certain clients, they have a license to those rules. It would be phenomenal to be able to include those rules in the corpus of materials that you use to train your LLM. Specifically, you know, for your model plus these materials that we have access to from a licensing perspective, right? I mean, the big issue with ChatGPT getting sued by New York Times, they didn't bother to license the materials, but we have clients that, as part of their contract, have access to data that no one else does. And then, you know, I have 15 years of documents that are our bread and butter, and it would be. What do 200 seats cost? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. I can find an investor to pay for that, right? I mean,
okay. Yeah, we're Peter. We'll definitely follow up with you on that, because yeah, we're really excited about these enterprise deployments, because you're hitting on. So, you know, we're going over the web app, and I know there's sort of different audiences here, but the enterprise deployments are really fun because we could do that kind of customization and build out something really really special. So to sort of naturally segue to the next point here, we do have a discount available for HeyCounsel members. It is through the Built First channel. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, that is. But if you have difficulty, we've had some integration fun with them. So it should be available. I can send the link out to our Built First instance, and it should be pretty easy to redeem that. But if you run into problems, just reach out to me on Slack.
Yeah, and you could similarly reach out to myself and Michael Woodson about that. You know, you say you're a HeyCounsel member, and I'll share our contact info again.
One of the questions I actually want to touch on was something that both Andrew and Doe are similarly kind of pointing out as the last questions in the chat. multiple state law, I found that in my own research that you can only really, I guess, scan a certain amount. Like
Mhm.
you can only really query a certain state, or you can't do multiple states or do anything like a state law survey. Is that true? And if so, is there any thought to expanding the ability to do
Yep.
multiple state analysis or state law surveys?
Yes, it is true right now that you're limited to one database for the laws, rules, and regulations, and it is also on the product roadmap, like with some immediacy, to improve that to allow you to select multiple jurisdictions. There's a technical sort of challenge there that I'm not going to bore everybody about, but it's not as easy as you might think. It's, on the front end side, it looks like a selector where you're selecting multiple tools. But on the back end side, it's a much more dynamic process where you have to have an autonomous agent that's kind of directing the AI to different databases and sourcing things. And there have to be some guardrails because you don't just want the most relevant things. You want things from every of the selected source, every selected source, right? So there's actually more of a technical challenge than it seems on the front end. But I will certainly note and reiterate the interest internally to the engineering team, and as the product lead, I know this is like a kind of a major thing. I think you could certainly expect to see that kind of thing. Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's one of those things that it seems easier than it is technically, but we certainly can do it, and it's on the roadmap for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I totally appreciate the fact that I think we all underestimate how hard it is to build things like this, but yeah, that would be massive. And yeah, one kind of similar question is, I found myself as a user of Paxton kind of bouncing in between different modules. So like
Mhm.
I would start with either like state law research or federal research, and then bounce to like document drafting, or start with case law research and go to and I find that experience, it's helpful to compartmentalize, but at the same time, it's sort of annoying to like take context from one thing
For sure.
and then figure out how to repurpose it for another module, because research should be with statutes and case law, and then ultimately drafting. So is there some thought around kind of creating more synergies between the different modules?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is another, so sort of behind the scenes, we have like individual sort of autonomous agents doing each of these tasks, and then we're going to overlay kind of, well, they're not autonomous agents. We have individual agents, and then we're going to overlay an autonomous one that can direct queries. But again, that's actually a technical challenge, not an impossible one, but it certainly requires engineering resources. So it is another thing that's on the roadmap that we are building. And it's definitely coming, like particularly the research, like we're going to be merging the laws, rules, and regulations and the state and federal, case law. We're definitely going to be looking to merge that. We're making UI improvements in terms of selecting case law, right? Where like it's going to look better. Everything's going to improve, I think, massively. And you'll see, if you're a user of the platform, you'll see the sort of difference in the quality of the product. If you're using it for even a month or 2 months, there are going to be improvements. But yeah, in terms of like thinking about how we merge the modules, we are definitely thinking about that. Now, on the flip side, there is some real value for attorneys. Like we've gotten a lot of feedback that people don't necessarily need just simplicity. They want accuracy, they want customization. And so, we're giving a lot of thought internally about whether, for example, to merge or how to merge drafting and research, because, there are different kinds of drafting you might want to do. We don't necessarily want, to bog down the drafting feature with case law if you're going to be talking about, a license where it might not necessarily need to be running through all of the case law for particular contract clause language, when really what you want is sort of example documents, right? So we're definitely thinking about how to merge the modules, and it's on the roadmap. And if anyone has suggestions, again, we're pretty open, very open to feedback.
Yeah. Thanks for all that context. I think it's probably the most challenging thing to build for the umbrella customer of lawyers, when every lawyer does different stuff and has a different process. So it's definitely in pretty much an impossible challenge. So creating a smooth UI for all different types of lawyers is tough. But I mean, I for one have used your product. I think there's a lot of fluff out there, but I think Paxton's doing a great job in right now, like your raw efforts in creating something that's super useful. So I've been impressed. So
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun to build it. And like I said again, we're a really technical team. We're iterating constantly. We've made improvements, sort of a lot of improvements in terms of the back end, case law, in terms of UI, in terms of different features. So all this stuff is very valuable to us, and we do in fact adjust the product roadmap based on user feedback. So we're very close to our users. And if anyone has would like to sign up, just go ahead and try it out. It's a 2-week free trial, and then $99 a month per user, and that's before the discount with that we have for HeyCounsel members, right? So pretty affordable, particularly compared to the other tools that might not have the sort of robust features that we have. We still have about 10 minutes here. Any further questions? Anyone want me to try out a particular research question or drafting question, anything like that?
I have a random question about AI policies. So law firms are having to draft into their their internal policies the use of AI. Are there any open source policies that you've seen that we could get started with?
It's a great question. You could definitely ask Paxton to help. So try it. I no, off the top of my head, no, I don't have any suggestions in terms of like particular language. Except to say that you should include Paxton for sure in your engagement letters, and your clients will be happy.
We have to, for like companies like Block, we have to list every single piece of technology we use in the security audits.
Yeah, no, I know I mean, it does take some time. The bigger deployments there are a lot of these kinds of security privacy hurdles that we have to go through, and our customers have been putting us through, and that we've been going through together. So totally understand that particular pain point.
Awesome. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? We can let everyone go if not.
Super cool question on my end. Could you just elaborate a bit on your privacy policy, right? Because obviously attorneys are subject to confidentiality. Everything we do in representation of a client needs to remain confidential. And to what I guess it would just be helpful for you to elaborate a bit on Paxton's confidentiality policy, and if there's anything else you could share that would be relevant.
Yeah, so we don't train on any data that you input into Paxton. You can check out our privacy policy and terms of service. They're right on the website. So you can go ahead and check them out, click into it, and you'll get the full terms here. Right, so that's available. If you have any particular questions, feel free to shoot them over. I'll share my email as well. Yeah, we don't train on your data, so that's obviously important. And from a technical perspective, from a security standpoint, I know like Michael said, we're working towards our, we're compliant. We're working towards our audits from the sort of the bigger privacy providers. And again, this is a little bit out of my purview. But yeah, I hope that helps, Sam. Feel free to check out our policy and ask any questions, just specific questions. We're happy to answer those.
I have a somewhat related question to that. Has any state bar associations reached out to you about the use of AI and the permissibility of sharing client data or uploading client data and things of that nature? When Google came out and people were sharing stuff via Google and uploading stuff to Google Drive, there was concerns about hey, are we technically breaking attorney-client privilege by sharing with this outside third party that has no relationship with that client, et cetera.
Yeah, so we have a relationship actually. We just we're like in the process of onboarding the California Bar Association, I believe, right?
Okay.
Right, Michael? Yeah, so they're actually users. So I don't know that they have a particular opinion about Paxton or AI, but from their actions, they're going to be using our product. We also have a relationship with the Hawaii judiciary. So we're also, Paxton is being used by the entire Hawaii judiciary for various research needs, I believe, and sort of drafting and file analysis needs as well. So we do have, I'm not, I won't go so far as to say that we have like a official endorsement from those, but they are users, and that does suggest something about the adoption of the tools.
Okay, yeah, I mean, obviously judiciary doesn't have the attorney-client privilege thing, but they have other.
They do have confidentiality concerns.
Yeah, they have other confidentiality concerns. So, okay, great. Just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think sort of like there was a big hubbub about like cloud providers that has sort of been settled now, right? Many law firms are all transitioning to fully cloud services.
Oh yeah,
and I
exactly.
think,
yeah.
So there's some ambiguity right now, but I certainly think, and again, don't hold me to this, but in my personal opinion, I think the bar associations will find a way to incorporate and permit the use of different AI tools, even with confidential data. It doesn't make sense to me that this would be restricted and cloud providers are allowed, right? It's sort of a similar kind of thing. Because we're not training on the data, right? That's an important thing, right? You're not gonna, there are issues where, for example, with ChatGPT, they do train on your data, particularly the sort of the web app ChatGPT. So, if you put in something confidential there and then somebody else asks a really tailored question, you might leak your data, and that's not going to happen with Paxton. Thank you, Jenny. I just saw you're in the chat. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Eddie and Michael. This has been super, super informative and really cool to see what you all are building and hear about what is coming down the pipeline. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I guess if anyone on this call has any questions about the deal that we have, reach out to me, and then or just I guess we can reach out to Eddie as well. Very informal around here, but yeah, this has been super great. So thanks so much for your time.
Great, thank you all. It was a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you guys on Paxton. And anyone has particular questions, feel free to reach out. And certainly, Peter, I think we should definitely connect after this for what we discussed. So thanks, everybody.
Happy.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you.